In this lesson, we look into how multi-threading is achieved within the context of Java Enterprise Edition version 8 web containers, which in our case is Tomcat 9. This will just be a short introduction to a vast and complicated subject that has many books devoted to it. At this stage, it is time to revisit our sample user story, as we are now going to start with the coding and implementation. As an expatriate living abroad, I want to create an online database of all charities and nonprofits that operate in my home country. Our example project will allow charities to register with our online database and send us their official tax registration forms. Charities should be able to register their information online and provide attached files such as nonprofit tax registration status and address details. Our specific example will have to use internationalization and localization for specific language groups and regions. Because we handle sensitive information, our example project will have to be really secure. These are our action items, and we've already touched on the first two items in our previous lesson. So now we reach the point where we will build the actual web application that will allow for the administration of the online charity database. The first two items start coding. We'll visit the official Apache Tomcat 9 configuration reference, and we'll go to the introduction, and here we learn that when a web request comes in to a Tomcat 9 web server, it is handled by the thread model. So it says each incoming non-asynchronous request requires a thread for the duration of that request. If more simultaneous requests are received that can be handled by the currently available request processing threads, additional threads will be created up to the configured maximum. If still more simultaneous requests are received, Tomcat will accept new connections until the current number of connections reaches max connections. Connections are queued inside the server socket created by the connector until a thread becomes available to process the connection. Once max connections has been reached, the operating system will queue further connections. The size of the operating system provided connection queue may be controlled by the accept count attribute. If the operating system queue fills, further connection request may be refused or may time out. I'll leave it for self-study to go over this document in detail. And now we are going to our course documentation and to the multi-threading section. And we'll see a recap of what we have just explained, as well as the recap of our sample user story. And right here is where we start going into Eclipse and our code. So we are going to create a Maven archetype web app and upgrade it to match Java Enterprise Edition version 8 using Jakarta. Here we are back in Eclipse, and we are on our multi-threading web start branch. So now we'll create a new module using the web archetype. So here is our generated module. Now we have to upgrade it to the Java Enterprise Edition version definition. So we'll start with our POM file and we'll compare it with our JEE8 web app POM file. It looks like the model version is fine, the parent is fine. We'll update the URL. We are on Java 11 and we are going to need version 4.01 of the Servlet API. We will also be using log4j. And we'll upgrade some of these plugin version that the archetype generated for us. Save it. And our POM file is now in line with our baseline reference web app. And now, in the same vein, we are going to compare our web.xml config files. Here is our generated config file. Here is our reference config file. So we'll update the version to 4.0. We'll change the display name. We will add our welcome file list or our landing page list. Save it. Now we'll add a source main Java and a source main test folder. And now we'll add our package. And we'll start by adding our Pojo classes, starting off with the registration. And we'll see our registration object needs a file attachment object for our tax documents. Now we'll add a charity registration servlet. Now we'll see our servlet is an annotation configured servlet. And we use the command pattern with action parameters to either list our registration, create registration, view a registration, and download the file attachment of a selected registration. We'll see the logic in our do post. Depending on what action, it either creates one or sends it back to the servlet. We generate the forms by printing HTML. Since we haven't gotten to the JSP section of our course yet, we do the same for viewing the registrations. And here is the logic for downloading a registered charities file attachment, and the same with listing the charity registrations. And here is our create registration method, which uses these two helper methods to process the file and to get the registration. Now at this stage we are going to update our charity registration Eclipse project natures and settings. So we'll go to Properties, Project Facets, and we'll update the dynamic module to version 4 because that is what our Eclipse project matched to on the facets. That looks good, so we'll hit apply and close. And now we see our deployment descriptor here in our charity registration is set up to version 4, and it shows us the properties in Eclipse. We'll also look at our landing index.jsp page of our JE8 web app, and we will update our own index.jsp to redirect to the charity registration servlet. Now we'll look at our charity registration servlet, and we'll see the volatile keyword specifying our in-memory database charity ID. And we'll also see a synchronized block here where the ID gets incremented and the new registration object gets put into the charity registration database, which is our linked hash map. Now, to get a better understanding of the use of the volatile keyword and synchronized blocks, we'll go to the old Java JDK8 tutorial and we'll visit the synchronization section and we'll go to atomic access and we'll learn here what the volatile does for us. It essentially ensures that two or more threads won't be able to overwrite the value in the variable. And when we go to intrinsics, locks, and synchronization, here we see the example of what we used, and it explains to us that we actually put a lock on that section of the code, which secures the access to the updating part of the code when multiple threads wants to access it. And now we're finally ready to run our app. We'll go to charity registration. We'll register a test charity. We'll select a sample tax doc and submit. And it looks like the charity has been registered. We'll go to the list of registrations and we see registration number 1. Once we select charity name, we see our charity. That means everything is in order and working. And that concludes this tutorial. I will see you in the next one.